Welcome back to Two Old Bloggers, everybody. I'm Dave, joined as usual by Darren. The NFL offseason is in full swing for absolutely everybody. And for us as Vikings fans, the biggest question mark is staring us right in the face: the quarterback position. And you know us, we like to talk about the quarterback. J.J. McCarthy stepped in last year and started 10 games, but it was rough. 57.6% completion, 1,632 yards, 11 TDs against, and 12 interceptions. A 72.6 passer rating. No easy answers there, and Coach O'Connell hasn't locked him in as the unquestioned starter for 2026. Rumors are flying. Could Kirk Cousins be released by the Falcons any day now and come back home? Or are we chasing Kyler Murray? Derek Carr, if he unretires? Geno Smith? Guys all who are reportedly want to play here with J.J. McCarthy, Justin Jefferson, and crew. And this whole setup that the Vikings have going for them. It's make or break this offseason. We're diving into the depressing reality for McCarthy. Why he might not get a chance at that grace period in 2026. Lessons from Sam Darnold's Super Bowl run in Seattle. Defensive line priorities and more. So buckle up, SKOL Nation. Let's talk Vikings QB future, or are we heading into the past? All next on Two Old Bloggers. Let's rock! Vikings First and SKOL presents This Week in Vikings Land with Darren and Dave, your two old bloggers. Hey there, everyone. I want to welcome everybody that's in the chat already. We have Raymond, Sully Tool. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Biggs is here. Who else are we missing? Dark Norsevius. Oh, Norsevius has a dark side. Daniel. And who else am I missing? T. Kubler's in here. Welcome, welcome, welcome. And anybody I missed, hey there, Doc. Welcome to the show. And hopefully today we're back at our normal off-season scheduled time. Sunday at 4 o'clock Central. Until somebody goes on vacation.
Dave loves it when I go on vacation. He thinks I take too much vacation. Maybe he's right. I don't know.
Well, you got to give Tyler some grief because guess what he's going on this week?
Oh, is he got a trip to Mexico or something?
He's going down to Arizona to visit the in-laws.
Oh, okay. Well, hey,
but
can't say I blame him.
No, hey, it is what it is. So, anyways. And that was not my starting screen.
That's okay. Mm-hmm. Give people a little taste of what's happening.
A little taste of what's coming up. That's right. We have the QB future. Because it all comes down to this season. What happens in 2026?
Yeah, it does for perhaps for J.J. McCarthy, which is what we're going to kind of get into here. But
not just him.
Yeah, not just him, yes. The head coach as well, and a lot of his staff. But digress a little. Anyway, you're a great intro, Dave. You kind of got into it. You teased it up for everybody, what our first theme's going to be about. And it's going to be looking at the quarterback position, because when the clock went zero in the fourth quarter on the Super Bowl, the NFL season officially started for everyone, including the Vikings. And for the Vikings, that offseason, the dominant topic is going to be, seems like it always is the quarterback situation that we have here, because of a few reasons. when you look at the first thing was with JJ McCarthy, his first season as a starter, produced no answers on what he might be, I don't think. Lots of questions about how viable he can be as a starting quarterback in the NFL. And then you've got with head coach Kevin O'Connell not declaring McCarthy as the unquestioned starter in 2026. I think all bets are off on McCarthy right now, who this time last year was the apple of a lot of Vikings' eye, including myself, including you, Dave.
Mm-hmm.
so
it's time to get into it.
Yes. So with that, I find this situation, which we seem to be in at almost every offseason for the past how many decades, is depressing to me.
Yes.
And
we've been doing this almost 3 decades apiece, and that is commenting publicly on the Minnesota Vikings, and this topic keeps coming back and coming back and coming back and coming back.
We can never get rid of it. But when I talk about the depressing situation, ESPN's Ben Solak had a story this week that drove home that vibe to me, because he identified 10 teams that need a starting quarterback next season, including the Vikings. And who does Solak think the Vikings will end up bringing back in to compete with McCarthy and build that competitive quarterback room that head coach Kevin O'Connell talked about in his end of season presser after back in January? Well, Solak, and keep in mind that he's a guy who doesn't cover the Vikings full time. I don't think he has any sources within the Vikings organization feeding him information like some other guys do, whether it's Pelissero or Gessling from the Star Tribune or Kevin Seifert. But he thinks that when all said and done, the Vikings are going to bring back our old friend Kirk Cousins when the Falcons inevitably release him in less than a month. And if that happens, Dave, I can just see you losing your mind. but I also don't think it's out of the question because Kirko, for whatever you might say about him, he performed pretty well in 2022 and 2023 when he was still a Viking and still playing for Kevin O'Connell. And we know that Kevin O'Connell held Kirko in high regard during that time. So and Cousins would know the offense very well if he were to come here. But even though some of that stuff makes sense, if you connect the dots, if Cousins were to be the Vikings' option to upgrade the quarterback unit and put a veteran in there to compete with McCarthy, I think it's going to be a very uninspiring choice for me. He's less mobile than he was when he left Minnesota in 2024, and he wasn't very mobile then. He'll turn 38 in August. I don't think his arm has gotten any stronger. And last year when he took over for injured Michael Penix, he had one great game against Tampa Bay. And I think he was just okay in every other game that he started and played in. I think the upside with Cousins, if you bring him in, it's pretty simple. And this is the upside, is if he comes back to Minnesota and he wins the starting job, you're looking at 10-7 at best and a wild card berth maybe, and another one and done playoff appearance. And I'm just not down with that option. I'd rather see McCarthy learn on the job again, take his lumps again, rather than the same old with Cousins.
You notice the image I put up here and the position Kirk is in. I have to have probably about a dozen different images of him standing there with his hands on his hips, disgruntled. Most of them with the Vikings, but that's just, we'll get more of that. And do we need more of that?
We do not. He was probably disgruntled there because he was watching Penix play and he thought he should have been playing. I'm not up with Cousins. I think that if he's brought in, as we were talking about off air, Dave, the Kirkistanis are going to love it. However many of those there are left, but there's going to be a lot of Vikings fans that are going to be up in arms and not happy with this because we thought we were done with this film. We've seen it before. We don't need to see it again, but maybe we will see it again. But he's not the only other option. There's others besides Cousins, and maybe the Vikings can pry Kyler Murray from the Cardinals if in a trade, or perhaps the Cardinals release Murray, and then we can sign him for whatever the asking price is. Mac Jones, maybe we can get Mac Jones from San Francisco. Apparently, the San Francisco will who said they weren't, or well, I shouldn't say. Kyle Shanahan was pretty clear that they aren't interested in trading him, but there was a report out this week that they'd take a third rounder for him. The Vikings are going to have 2 third rounders. Maybe they can get Mac Jones. Maybe they can sign Malik Willis with the promise of a starting job in free agency. You talked about Derek Carr. Apparently his throwing shoulder is healthy now, and he'll consider playing again in 2026 for a Super Bowl contender. And the Vikings, he might think the Vikings are a Super Bowl contender with him as a quarterback. You talked about Geno Smith. There's another guy. Right now he's under contract with the Raiders, but maybe they could, with the year he had, the Vikings might be able to pry him in a trade from a rebuilding team who's obviously going to pick Mendoza from Indiana as the number 1 pick. Maybe they can get him for like a day 3 pick. There's other options besides Cousins, but really hard to get excited about any of those guys. There was a comment earlier just after your intro, or somebody saying exactly that. And they're the best options who will likely be available. So, I would also say the Vikings, I would also say with all those other options, when you walk it back to J.J. McCarthy, I don't think things are looking very great for him right now as far as his future with the Vikings. And I think he's in a very, very tough spot because he's got a head coach, probably needs to win 1 playoff game at least, maybe 2 in 2026 to save his job. And that coach didn't back McCarthy as the starter for next season. He's got teammates, Justin Jefferson, Aaron Jones, talking publicly during the Super Bowl week about how Sam Darnold and Aaron Rodgers could have had the Vikings in the playoffs in 2025. I appreciate their honesty, but those things can't feel too good for J.J. McCarthy to have teammates and respected teammates like Jefferson and Jones saying those things. It almost feels like the organization has given up on J.J. McCarthy after only 10 NFL starts, and a couple he didn't even finish. When at the offseason, Dave, when we looked at this situation, we brought it up before. The situation he came in 2025 was supposed to be really an advantage for him and set him up for success. He had a quarterback-friendly coach, a lot of options to use on offense, a talented veteran team that, I think that it would be able to help him ride out some struggles he had. I think that's been a double-edged sword for him in this early stage of his career, because in 2025, the Vikings were supposed to take that roster and again overcome the occasional shaky play from a young quarterback like McCarthy and still win early and often. They didn't do that. That didn't reflect well on McCarthy, and we can now see that with his body work in the first year that he really wasn't ready to start at the NFL level. He could have used this season and maybe another to sit, watch, and learn and get used to the NFL and the pace of play and all the things that the defenses can throw at you. And that was a bad situation in Minnesota in ways, because we were in win now mode and McCarthy wasn't ready to get us in a position where we could win now. If he had been with another team, whether it's like the Jets or New Orleans, for example, he'd have had less talent to work with, which would hurt him, but there'd also be less pressure and less expectations that those teams were going to win now and challenge for the playoffs and certainly the Super Bowl. And so both of those teams would recognize they're in a rebuilding situation. They've got a young quarterback. They would have there'd be time for McCarthy to, 1 season, 2 seasons, maybe even 3, to again get adjusted to the NFL, get better. Those teams would be more willing to wait and see what they had with him, like you've seen with Carolina with Bryce Young, although that hasn't worked all that great for Bryce Young. I think there's a lot of questions still about how good he is. But McCarthy, in a different team, in a different situation, McCarthy would have had that grace period where people wouldn't have been expecting him to play elite level right off the bat. And, I think that McCarthy, he can get much better than he was in 2025 with more coaching, again, more reps, more game time experience. But the NFL, especially with a team that feels like it's ready to win now, they can't wait for that. And so even this offseason, Dave, if he gets 15 to 20% better than he was last year, I don't know if O'Connell is going to, depending on the veteran he brings in, I don't know if O'Connell is going to feel like that and is going to feel confident enough that that is enough to save his job and get the Vikings in a position where they're competing, getting back into the playoffs, and a team that's good enough to win multiple games in the playoffs. And it's kind of funny because not funny for McCarthy, but he just turned 23 in January. He begins his third season. He's got those 10 NFL starts, and it kind of feels like his time as a starter for the Vikings has already come to an end in such a short time. It's really, I feel like it's I shouldn't say shocking, because again, NFL teams and coaches don't have a lot of time to develop players. They don't have a lot of patience because of the pressure to win. But McCarthy's gone from the golden boy to somewhat of an afterthought in the span of 12 months. It's really been quite a fall, I think. I don't know how you feel about it, though.
Well, he has gone from the golden boy to the whipping child in that time period. He still has talent. We've all seen it. It's just a matter of putting it all together. Now, and him staying healthy. That's a big key to this. But we talk about this is a make or break year for J.J. McCarthy, and it is. He's got to show more improvement, and I believe he did in the last 4 games, even though some of that's poo-pooed. You got Matthew Collar saying, it's just like playing preseason games. They didn't have in all the starters. They didn't do this. They didn't do that. They had to dumb down the system for him. Well, is dumbing down the system for him a way of Kevin O'Connell adjusting so he could have success? People say, Kevin O'Connell wants to do nothing but throw long, deep balls every play. Well, he likes to go for that explosive play. Without a doubt, he does. That's his philosophy. But he even talked about during the season, it took him a while to learn how to win a different way. Mm-hmm. So he made an adjustment, which was good, necessary, and we obviously won the 5 last games in the process. Now, J.J. McCarthy's only had 10 starts. He hasn't reached 1,000 passes yet. It's, those certain milestones that need to be done before you judge a player. I think once he gets there, he will do fine. I think it is great. Now, as I sent you earlier this week, it all comes down to Kevin O'Connell. This isn't on J.J. McCarthy this year. It's on Kevin O'Connell. All the pressure is on KOC. KOC must win, and must win at least 1 playoff game, if not 2, or he's gone. So he's going to have to come up with the correct choice at quarterback, whether it be continue with J.J. McCarthy and his development, which I hope he's doing, or go for somebody else. And we listed a whole bunch of people that could possibly be. And some of them involve trades. Mac Jones, Derek Carr. Obviously, if they want to go for Cincinnati's quarterback, who supposedly doesn't want to come here. But anyways, all that requires trade and stuff. Do they want to do that? But out of all those names we've talked about as available, possible J.J. McCarthy competition, and actually starting over J.J. McCarthy, do any of them, ask the question, get this team to the Super Bowl?
Yeah, well, highly doubtful to me. I've said a few weeks ago, like Kyler Murray is the one that would.
This comes the closest out of that bunch, unless you go with Joe Burrow.
I hate using I hate using the word upside, but I feel like Murray, a former number one pick, is the guy that if you get him playing at the level he's played at in some seasons in Arizona, he could get the Vikings, I think, pretty far. Are you going to get that guy though? Is the question. Is he that guy anymore? And I don't know that, but he'd be of all those.
Kirk. Kirk's long ball's gone.
Yeah, he didn't throw very many passes beyond 20 yards this season with the Falcons, and I don't think that and he didn't do that a whole lot as last year, even in Minnesota in 2023. So he's a different kind of quarterback now than he was in 2018 when we signed him. But
yeah, he's more like Aaron Rodgers, smart but dink and dunk. Now,
yes, and even Rodgers is more mobile now than at 42 than Kirko ever was, even when he was younger. So, again, like I said earlier, Kirk Cousins. If he happens to end up here, there's not much I can do about it. I'm going to cheer for the Vikings regardless. And if he's a starting quarterback, I'm going to cheer for him to play well. But do I expect him to take the Vikings to a Super Bowl? Absolutely not. And neither does David Stefano. And I don't think a whole lot of other
I don't see it. But hey, we've been wrong before. We could be wrong again. And any sort of miracle and luck and all that sort of stuff can happen. We just hope that KOC makes the correct decision is what we're hoping for. Whether it be J.J. McCarthy or whomever QB B is. And if B becomes A, that's great, whatever. That KOC makes the correct decision and gets a long way into the playoffs. And we're talking about a successful season in 2026. That's why I say most of the pressure is not on J.J. McCarthy this offseason, even though there's a lot. It's on Kevin O'Connell.
Well, the thing that would scare me, and I'm not, it's hard to blame NFL teams because the pressure to win every year and right now is always there unless you're totally dregs like the Las Vegas is right now, where your fan base knows that the only way to go is up and it's going to take a while, right? But the Vikings aren't in that situation, but it would really kill me that if McCarthy and the thing that's happened to so many quarterbacks, young quarterbacks, promising quarterbacks, including Sam Darnold, is, they just don't play well at their first turn, and the team that drafted them, and the team decides to turf them because they're going to move on to the next shiny thing. And then McCarthy, who obviously needs more time, I don't even know, he probably he would have been a guy who would have been best suited to do what happened to Jordan Love and sit his first 3 seasons as a backup and then start become a starter in his 4th year. But that has not happened in Minnesota.
Played the first half of his games like absolute dog doo before he woke up.
Well, I did. I think Love's first
half of the season games was trash, and then he wasn't very good. MVP in the second half.
Yeah. Now, what would kill me is if McCarthy ends up becoming the very good quarterback you and I thought he could be last year when we drafted him, 2 or 3 seasons down the road, but with another team, not the Vikings. And then we continue to recycle these bridge guys, and we still get stuck in 10-7, 9-8 land, occasionally making the playoffs, but never having a shot in the draft at getting, the top prospect, whoever that is, so we can try to find that franchise guy.
Yep.
We seem to be stuck in that cycle. We thought McCarthy was going to break that cycle, but maybe because of impatience on the part of Kevin O'Connell in particular, and maybe the Wilfs too, we might still be stuck in that cycle.
Who knows? All right. Now on to theme 2. Oops. Hold on.
Yeah.
This week in Vikings land.
Oh, I like that. The Vikings moving around. It's
Mhm.
new.
It is new.
Dave's got some like motion in his graphics. Excellent. Yeah. So
Speaking of Sam Darnold,
speaking of Sam Darnold, speaking of mistakes, I know it's rubbing salt into my wounds and Vikings fans' wounds, and maybe Vikings fans don't want to hear about it even on this chat, but I did feel that with the Seahawks winning the Super Bowl, Sam Darnold leading them to that Super Bowl, and with the season he had in Seattle, that I did want to speak about it a little bit and acknowledge what Sam Darnold accomplished. We talked about it last week that we were going to be cheering for him, not necessarily the Seahawks, but him in this game. And, watching when we talk about mistakes and getting things wrong, Dave, last year I was 100% on board with the Vikings letting Sam Darnold go because of I didn't think that he was going to be enough to take us over the top, and going with JJ McCarthy. I thought that was the right move that the Vikings did, and it turns out maybe it still will be eventually, but this year it was not the right move. That's pretty clear. But one of the things as I watched Sam Darnold play in these playoffs, and I watched all of the Seahawks games in the playoffs and many others during the season, because I was curious to see how Darnold will do in with his new team. But with the Vikings, the reason the Vikings decided, I think, that Sam Darnold was not their franchise quarterback and JJ McCarthy was, a big reason was those last two games. And I think that they felt that Sam Darnold he wouldn't be able to, in the real pressure cooker games, that he wouldn't be able to avoid making major mistakes and avoid melting down. And so they decided that 14-3 and a one and done playoff appearance was probably almost as good as it could get with Sam Darnold at quarterback. And they went with JJ McCarthy. Watching the three games in the playoffs that the Seattle had, where they went 3-0 and went to the Super Bowl, what struck me watching those games was that the Los Angeles game, Sam Darnold played really, really, really well. No doubt about it. 3 touchdown passes, over 300 yards. He matched Matt Stafford throw for throw. Actually, didn't just match him, he beat him. I think played better. But in the other two games, the win against San Francisco, and then in the Super Bowl game, Darnold was, he played fine. Like he didn't have to put the team on his shoulders or anything like that. And in all of those 3 games, what he did exactly what I think the Vikings thought he couldn't do, and what I thought he couldn't do was that he didn't take a whole lot of sacks. He didn't make brain fart decisions when he got pressured and the pocket got messy, and he didn't put the ball in harm's way almost at all in those 3 games. And so you had a Seattle offense that maybe didn't look spectacular at times, but Darnold, I thought, played. He played kind of a game manager, steady captain role in that Super Bowl run, and he recognized that, and Seattle recognized that, and it worked. I think Sam Darnold recognized that with this defense I have and the special teams that we have, they're going to take care of their business. All I got to do is not mess things up, make a few good plays here and there, make sure keep our offense on time and on schedule. You saw many instances where Seattle in all those playoff games where if it was 3rd and long, and they were quite happy to just hand the ball off or throw a short screen and punt and move on to another drive where things might turn out better. They didn't want Sam Darnold decided that he wasn't going to play hero ball. He wasn't going to force throws into tight situations and try to make things happen. And with this team, that was the right way to go about it, and it led to them getting to the Super Bowl. And so, again, I thought Sam Darnold, even though his stats overall in those 3 games aren't super spectacular, like he only completed 50% of his passes in the Super Bowl game, but in that game, he faced a lot of pressure, a lot of blitzes from the Patriots. He made some plays where he avoided getting sacks and catastrophic plays, checked down. He took what the defense got him. And again, he knew that if the Seattle offense, all I got to do is have 4 or 5 drives where we are in a position to score points, and we'll probably win the game. And that's what he did. And I commend him for that. Again, he did things that I didn't think he could do in pressure cooker games. And again, he didn't play hero ball and didn't turn the ball over, didn't take a whole lot of sacks. And those are things that J.J. McCarthy has got to learn how to do in order to become a really good quarterback at the NFL level.
So, not just J.J. McCarthy. Kevin O'Connell needs to know how to call the games.
Mm-hmm.
With the guys in the chat are talking about, well, Sam had 100+ yards in the first half running the ball. The Seahawks did. And how much that helps the quarterback. Sam is a play-action pass guy. J.J. McCarthy's a play-action pass guy. When do we succeed? When we do play-action pass. So if you're doing play-action, you got to run the ball first and foremost. You need to establish the run. You don't have to be great at it. It helps, but you don't have to. But you've got to establish it. And Kevin O'Connell hadn't done that until we saw somewhat this season. So maybe it's Kevin O'Connell's evolving to be a better play caller there at the end to make things work, to win the last 5 games. Hopefully he continues with that development as well, as does J.J. McCarthy, and they learn from what Sam Darnold did and what the Seahawks did.
Mm-hmm. Along with Sam Darnold showing the Vikings up a little fair bit, like getting to the Super Bowl and winning it. Another guy who did, although not so much not this administration, is Clint Kubiak, the former Seahawks offensive coordinator and now the Las Vegas Raiders head coach. And we all know that Kubiak was our offensive coordinator in 2021, Mike Zimmer's last year as head coach with the Vikings. And that was a very unpopular hire at the time when Kubiak was put there, because I think a lot of Vikings fans felt that Kubiak didn't get the job because of merit. He got it because of nepotism. He got it because Mike Zimmer and Gary Kubiak, who of course is Clint Kubiak's dad, that Zimmer and Kubiak were close friends. They had a very good working relationship. Kubiak had been the Vikings offensive coordinator in 2020 and then retired. And so it was that whole season with Clint Kubiak as the offense coordinator, people didn't feel that he was qualified. They felt he was in over his head. They felt he got the job because daddy is Mike Zimmer's friend. It just, and it didn't help that by 2021, of course, a lot of Vikings fans had headed up to here with Mike Zimmer itself. They felt there was time for a change. The team was spinning his wheels with him as the head coach. They wanted him gone. They wanted somebody new. And so anybody he hired, particularly somebody who is the son of his buddy, how are they going to view that thing? The funny thing is that in 2021, the Vikings offense, while it wasn't a juggernaut, it was kind of middle of the road. But it certainly wasn't the disaster that Vikings fans would felt it was at times, or that you'd see the comments in 2021 talking about his playbook. I remember the Clint coloring book that was his playbook, that sort of thing. But 4 teams later, what do you know? Clint Kubiak's offensive coordinator in Seattle, and he comes up with an offense that suits Sam Darnold's strengths and works really well is very complementary with what the Seahawks do on defense and special teams, and it's good enough for them to win the Super Bowl. So kind of funny how things go in life and in the NFL too, where a reviled offensive coordinator that a lot of fans in Minnesota felt was in over his head and wasn't any good ends up being has now got a Super Bowl ring and was one of a key coach on a team that, again, rolled to a Super Bowl win. Tough times sometimes to be a Vikings fan, to see how things turn out.
It is. And believe it or not, I've heard numerous times, there are a half dozen coaches under Zimmer's tree that are well advanced in head coaches now and other stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, does Mike Zimmer get any credit? No.
No, he does not. And I didn't know that there's
Not
that many.
nationally.
Yeah. I didn't know there's that many from his coaching tree that have are doing pretty well. But Clint Kubiak's one of them.
Mm-hmm. No, but there is. I'll have to look it up and send it to you.
Now, Kubiak also got to work under Kyle Shanahan.
Oh yeah,
He went to Seattle, and so he had 4 years to build on what had happened in Minnesota and get better and refine how he coached offense, and it worked in Seattle, and it got him a head coaching job, and he's now joined Kevin O'Connell in the head coaching ranks.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And Big says we lost a lot of good coaches. Keep the KOC insanity needs to end. Well, part of those losing those coaches is they got promoted.
Yeah, I don't
because of KOC's success.
Overall. We're not going to talk about it, but there's some coaching movement this week. That's probably what Big Rel's talking about. But I'd probably look at it like you do, Dave, in that sense, in that if you've got coaches taking promotions and with other teams, I think that reflects very well on your coaching staff, actually, and the coaches that Kevin O'Connell picked, that other teams covet them enough that they're going to give them the offensive coordinator position when they were the quarterback coach 2 years ago, or in the case of
defensive coordinator.
Tony Sorrentino left this week. He was the assistant wide receivers coach. Now he's the wide receivers coach in Arizona under Mike LaFleur. So they're moving up in the coaching ranks, which is what most coaches want to do. And somebody must think that they're pretty good coaches if they're promoting them.
Mm-hmm.
So we do have to replace them ourselves. But I think that if Kevin O'Connell picked a good first batch of coaches, then he must have an eye for coaching talent. And I think we can have some confidence that the guys he brings in to replace them will also could potentially thrive in their positions as well.
All right. Now, next topic, speaking of coaches, Brian Flores.
Yeah, and we got word Thursday, I think, that Flores, a decision has been, like, Flores' discrimination lawsuit against the NFL, which is now 4 years long, because he started in 2022, that an arbitrator has decided, or the courts have decided that this will not go to arbitration process, which is what the NFL wanted it to do, and they wanted to do that because the arbitrator would be Roger Goodell, who is paid by all 32 NFL teams, and of course would have no bias whatsoever.
None whatsoever.
In this situation, he'd be a fair, unbiased arbiter of this situation.
Yeah. Besides his $32 million a year salary, if I remember correctly, and his free use of a Gulfstream G600 or whatever it is. Yeah. No bias.
No bias at all. But the courts have decided that it's not going to go to arbitration. It will go to court. And I think there's a pretrial hearing April the 3rd on this. So I bring this up, that's not news, but I do feel that this at least is the start of this lawsuit coming to some conclusion at some point in time. We don't know when that's going to be, but this makes it a step closer as the legal scene grinds away. And to me, this isn't, while it's good for Brian Flores, it's not great as a Vikings fan, because again, the closer I think that this lawsuit gets to being resolved, then it's pretty clear, Dave, that this lawsuit is the reason Brian Flores has not been a head coach either in last season or this season. When I look at all the people who have been hired as head coaches after the 2024 season and after this season, I don't think any of them have as good a resume or have been as good a coach in the NFL at their previous stops as Flores has shown he has been.
Even if you just take the defensive guys that were hired as head coaches. Yeah.
Yeah, like clearly NFL owners have no interest in hiring him as a head coach because of the lawsuit. But once that drops, once that is resolved, whether it's in Flores' favor or the NFL's favor, Dave, I think that's where the chance where an NFL owner who feels that Flores is the coach for him can turn his franchise around, I think that the end of that lawsuit gives them an out to actually offer him a job and they don't have to be worried about breaking ranks with the NFL owners anymore. The lawsuit is done, it's dusted, and then they get a chance to interview him and feel that there's not going to be repercussions to them, whatever that would be, to hiring Flores. And that's not great, because then he will no longer be our defensive coordinator. Mm-hmm. So we don't know when that'll be, how long this is going to take to get resolved, but it seems to be the step to go to court is, there's a path forward for it now, and we know it's going through the courts. So again, this is getting somewhat closer to getting resolved, and that's not a good thing for the Vikings unless somehow they decide to make Flores the head coach of the Vikings in a year or two, replace O'Connell with him, which will make a lot of Vikings fans happy.
Yes, it will. Now, there's still the possibility. I thought I read that the NFL wants to appeal to the Supreme Court. I don't think they're going to. I think the Supreme Court will look at it and go, no. The lower federal court says, go to trial, go to trial.
Yeah. Of course, the NFL, I would say, why spend more money fighting this? Like, just let it play out now. But the NFL is not short of financial resources either. So, right. I don't know.
And it's going to probably end up costing the NFL some money, not only for Brian Flores, but the other two plaintiffs as well.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
It is what it is. Well, speaking of bad people, Roger Goodell is in the news again.
He is.
If by bad, I mean his policies, his decisions, whatever. I'm sure he's a nice guy and sweet. His family loves him and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, there was a bit of bad news this week, at least, Dave, for you and I and other people who cover the NFL and the Vikings, is that another arbitrator who was not Roger Goodell, I don't think, ruled this has to do with the NFL Players Association team report cards. And again, this week, Thursday or Friday, that arbitrator ruled that the NFL PA's team report cards that have been released publicly the past 3 seasons violate the collective bargaining agreement, and they can no longer be released publicly because the reasoning was that they violate the collective agreement because they make some teams and individuals look bad. So that was.
And there's supposedly a line in the CBA that says you cannot disparage anybody, anything. Got to protect the shield, sort of thing.
Yeah. And it was interesting, Dave, because the NFL put out a memo about this with some interesting narrative in it. And the NFLPA also issued a memo with, of course, exact opposite narrative on this. But the NFL claimed victory in this, and they were saying that the team report cards at the NFLPA had admitted that they cherry pick quotes and all this sort of stuff, and they made it seem like it's totally bogus report card. The NFLPA said that the arbitrator did not feel that way at all, but a little bit of back and forth there. But still, this sucks for me and you, because this was something that we look forward to seeing every year, particularly because the Vikings have in the 3 years that it's been publicly available, the Vikings have either finished first on the team report card as far as the work environment that they're putting together, and the Wilfs, Mark and Ziggy Wilf put together, and also or second in that report card. And so this has been, and I think that the Wilfs aren't very happy about this either, because the Vikings have done so well on the report cards, it's led to a lot of good press for them and the Vikings organization. But it also didn't please some NFL players, including former NFL player J.J. Watt, who talked about how, the NFL doesn't like the fact that these team report cards make some teams look bad, but they have no issue with Sunday Night Football publishing rankings at the start of the game for each starting offensive and defensive player for both teams, the PFF grades, and showing how bad some players are graded. And they do have a point there, because I take example, former Viking punching bag Ed Ingram, right, who's pictured here with the Saints. I'm sure Ed Ingram didn't really feel very happy that when he would play on Sunday Night Football while he was with the Vikings, that NBC would put up his very low 52, 51
grade.
50 something grades for the season so far, and his very, very low ranking amongst all guards up there for everybody to see. I'm sure he didn't feel he felt that was doing him wrong. So I can see where the players are pretty upset about this, and it sucks for us because we won't get to see how the Vikings do in this report card this year, because the NFLPA is still going to do the report cards. They're still going to do the survey. They're still going to provide it to the players. Only the players can't reveal anything publicly, from what I understand. We'll see if some of that stuff leaks out, but we won't get to see where the Vikings stand as far as the work environment that they're providing. And of course, these report cards rank everything from like team travel to how players' families are treated, to the training facilities, to the head coaches, to the food that they get served.
Yeah, the food.
Mm-hmm. It goes through the whole gamut of the work environment, and we're not going to find out or it doesn't look like we're going to find out how the Vikings and every other NFL team ranks with that. The good news is, though, that the NFLPA is still going to do them. The players are still going to get them. So the Vikings might not get good press out of this, but if they still rank highly in the report card as they have the previous three surveys, the players will know this, that are free agents or that the Vikings are looking to trade for, and the Wilfs can still, and their front office can still use this as a bargaining tool for free agency and even for the draft picks that they're wooing. But again, the only thing that does suck that you and I and everybody else who isn't part of the NFL
will not get an NFL Players Association official release.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Hopefully we get it leaked, but we won't get an official one.
So a bit of a bummer, and I don't know if there's any potential for this decision to get overturned eventually so that they become public again. But as for now, you're not going to get that report cards, which usually came out in April, or I feel like it was April.
Somewhere in the spring.
Yeah.
Now, J.J. Watt said the whole purpose of this when he was a union member was to get change at the ownership level to improve working conditions, which sounds very familiar with what a union wants to do, right? Mm-hmm. Any union. You want to change so the working conditions get better. Well, they came up with this method of let's grade everybody and then put it out, and it embarrassed some owners because there's some really, 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 really cheap owners. And whether it be the Cardinals and their uneven, I remember when it started out, the uneven, unsafe weight room and having all the players have to buy their own meals and do this and do that. And it was versus a team like Miami where everything's provided. It's just a wonderful thing. Top of the line facilities, just like in Egan. And it drove other owners to make changes and improve stuff, including Robert Kraft, who initially was graded low in New England, has now improved facilities there. It drove, some teams to move, i.e. the Raiders, stuff like that. It all helps to get better working conditions, which these guys should get, because they're putting themselves through all sorts of grief and physical harm and abuse and all sorts of stuff. We talk about it weekly, the injury, everything else. Well, if you can make their lives a little bit better, why not? And Campbell can afford it. So,
and some of those things potentially could lengthen their careers, like the training facilities that you provide or the food that you serve. Even like the taking care of families, the mental weight that takes off of players of not having to worry about if their family, where their families are, what they're doing, all that sort of stuff. So, a bit weird that that you would be, well, I shouldn't say weird, because I can understand that some owners, I'm sure a lot of them are very successful business people, and they probably got also big
Well,
egos
they're all
to go with.
billionaires, so
Yeah, they got big egos to go with that. They don't like being embarrassed publicly, but sometimes you have to be embarrassed to up your game. And that's what's happened with the Patriots, the Patriots way. But the Patriots way was off the field work environment wasn't so rosy, once upon a time. And but they're making improvements, like you say. Even the Bengals are, making changes to their training facilities. I understand.
And Arizona did as well. They still got a ways to go, but yes. Now I'm curious for this season, because head coaches are graded. I'm curious if KOC drops after 2025.
Yeah. He probably would drop a little. Although, again, we talked about this before. It didn't look to me like the team quit on him, even though things were going really, really bad last season for a good stretch of time. And his biggest decision on the quarterback, it really didn't go very well. But the team kept playing hard. It still seemed to believe in what he was putting out there. But I think that he probably would drop. Just from where the Vikings were in 2024 to where they were in 2025, you could see how that disappointment there might be some spillover on the popularity of the head coach there too.
Yeah, he had an A+ when I made this slide. So
yeah, doesn't get much better than that.
All right. What comes after theme 2?
Theme 3, Dave.
The one I had everybody peeking at, the D-line.
Yeah, we continue to do our off-season look at the different Vikings positional units, and this is our first crack at the defensive side of things this week, and we're looking at the defensive line, which I think, along with the offensive line, I think the Vikings defensive line is actually in pretty good shape overall. We've got some young, I think, promising talent there, and they're cheap and young. Did I mention that? They're young and cheap and seem to be getting better. And they still have
a couple of them that are old, but okay.
They got some young, cheap, and inexpensive talent. They also have a couple of veterans who are not inexpensive, but did provide ate up a lot of snaps last year. And if they're on the team, they'll probably eat up a lot this year. And played somewhat well at times last year. So I think the Vikings, again, defensive line things, I'm encouraged by the way that room looks right now. I think the biggest thing that's to be excited about, and we've talked about this guy a number of times on the show in the past 12 months, is Jalen Redmond. This guy has been a revelation for the Vikings, and he's a guy that hasn't earned an extension from the Vikings, I believe. He's an exclusive rights free agent right now, which means that while he's technically a free agent, he really isn't. Like, the Vikings have control over him this year, and they could easily do what they did last year, which is sign him to a cheap 1 year, very, very minimal deal, and he'll have to take it. But when you look at Redmond last year, we liked what we saw in 2024 from him, but it was a small sample size. What we saw in 2025 was not a small sample size. He played 74% of the defensive snaps. He was our best defensive lineman by a long mile. He was one of the best players on a very, very good defense. And he showed that 2024 in that small sample size was not a fluke. So I think that he's earned an extension, and because he's still young, he's still 26, but because his resume he hasn't shown this level of play like 3 or 4 seasons, I think that even as well as he played last year, he's still a guy that the Vikings could sign for a relatively modest extension. And despite the fact that he was one of the better defensive linemen in the NFL last year, but because of his play, he's only been in the league basically a year and a bit. I think he can be an affordable extension signing for the Vikings. And I think that they should do that now instead of waiting a year and maybe he plays just as well or better, and then the price goes up and up and up for him. So he's going to be back with the Vikings, hopefully with a 2 or 3 year extension at a very reasonable price, and he's going to have a major role in this Vikings defense in 2026 as long as he stays healthy. Again, because of you love to see how the burst he has off the line, his ability to rush the passer, his ability to make plays beyond the line of scrimmage and create tackles for losses and blow up running plays and all that sort of stuff. He's just been an awesome find for the Vikings, and again, they need to reward him, and I think that hopefully that they will. The one
he's
thing
good
he
at
is,
both, against the run and against the pass.
In the pass. And the only thing that Redmond's going to have to get used to, and this probably happened towards the back half of the season anyway, but because of how he played last year, Dave, he's going to be a guy that offenses are going to focus on. They're going to game plan for in 2026. So he can expect more attention next year from offenses. And that also means more blockers, devoted to him, which might make it seem like which could impact his production. This year he had 6 sacks, which is really, really good for an interior defensive lineman like him. But he's going to get more attention from offenses, and so we'll see how he does with that. But he's going to have a large role with the Vikings, and again, one of our best defensive players last year on a very good defense. So Jalen Redmond, get him signed, Vikings, and do right by him.
And we heard his name a lot during broadcasts, and that's always a good thing for a defensive lineman.
Yes. And it was funny because Redmond ended up outplaying by, I think, a pretty wide margin the 2 big free agent signings from 2025, which was Jonathan Allen and Javon Hargrave. Now, Hargrave and Allen, they were brought in here to create more of a pass rush for the Vikings along the interior, and I think that they did do that. They certainly pressured the quarterback a lot more, and PFF has got the numbers on how many pressures they had. They were much more active as a pass rushers and much more effective as pass rushers than the guys that they replaced, which were Jonathan Bullard and Harrison Phillips. But they also, I felt, were pretty weak against the run, defending the run a lot of times. And so the Vikings gained in the pass rush, but they lost in the run defense side of things, I felt. And they really didn't provide good value for money for the amount that the Vikings were paying them. But when you look at Hargrave, he looks like a guy that I think there's going to be a fairly, he's talked about as a guy that the Vikings are going to move on from. They're probably going to cut. He's got a salary cap hit that's around just north of $21 million going into 2026. That is not, that's very, very high for him with the production he had last year. But if they cut him pre-June 1st, the salary cap, savings they're going to make is quite substantial. He just turned 33. I think that Hargrave is a one and done player with the Vikings. He's a goner. They're going to move on from him. Jonathan Allen is a guy who also potentially be a cut, but the salary cap math doesn't work out as well for him. He's got a very large salary cap hit for 2026. It's about $24 million, I believe. But if you cut him pre-June 1st, you're going to take a salary cap hit of about 17, almost 18 million. The Vikings are not going to do that. Plus, Allen played the most percentage of defensive snaps of any defensive lineman last year. He was like 75.4%, I believe. So if you get rid of him, you got to replace that amount of playing time. And who's going to do that? I think the Vikings, he's not going to have a salary cap hit of 24 million plus. What the Vikings are going to do, he's 30, just turned 31. The Vikings likely are going to do or rework his contract some way, shave off some of that cap hit for this season, move it to 2027 and see what happens there. I think they're also going to look, though, to reduce the amount of snaps that he had last year in hopes that that'll make him a bit more fresher and effective throughout the season. But I think Allen will be back. He'll be expensive, but he'll be back largely because, A, they don't really have anyone who they may feel that could play that amount of snaps, and also because of just the salary cap math and taking too big of a salary cap hit by cutting him. Levi Drake Rodriguez last year, I thought he played pretty well overall. He showed the talent that made the Vikings pick him on the 7th round in 2024. Love his motor. It's nonstop. He does got some pass rush ability. He's pretty good at winning off the snap at times and getting into the backfield and messing up running plays and creating some havoc there. He certainly improved a ton compared to his rookie year. He played, I think, over 40% of the defensive snaps. He's a guy whose trajectory is trending upward, and I see him potentially being the guy that gets the starting job if and when the Vikings move on from Javon Hargrave. I like where he's headed right now. So, again, the things are looking good for him, and he's a guy who was a late day 3 pick. Nice find by the Vikings there. Tyrion Ingram-Dawkins, the rookie defensive lineman. I think there's a lot more juice to squeeze from this orange, Dave. He didn't have much of a role this year. He didn't really stand out too much at all. You're showing his 1 sack he had, though, which was against Dylan Gabriel in Cleveland back in jolly old England. But he played a lot more than other recent Vikings draft picks, day 3 draft picks who were interior defensive linemen. We always knew that he was going to be a developmental guy, that he needed to get stronger and learn how to be a pro. And he kind of got the Levi. He didn't get the Levi Drake Rodriguez treatment because he actually suited up for almost every game and played in almost every game and played a fair amount of snaps in a lot of those games. So he's another guy, I think, with a year of offseason work, getting stronger, learning refining his pass rush moves and how to hold the win leverage. I see him again. He's going to have an increased role in the defensive line as well, and he just turns 23, I believe, in a few months. He's very, very young. He was very, very green coming into the NFL because he didn't play a lot at Georgia, but he's a guy that I think has got a pretty promising future with the Vikings and could be a key piece of the defensive line. Maybe not so much in 2026, but certainly 2027 and 2028. But I like him. Elijah Williams is a guy. He kind of was the Levi Drake. He got the Levi Drake Rodriguez treatment this year. He made the team because he was one of the standouts of the preseason, I think, along the defense. He showed an ability to get after the passer, again, make plays behind the line of scrimmage. But I think that if you look at him, and there was a couple of Vikings videos where they showed the players in the locker room, and Elijah would have his shirt off. Not a very impressive build. But is a little bit pudgy and not a whole lot of muscle there. But he's a guy that I think likely Levi Drake Rodriguez in 2024. He got to dress a few games, but mostly he didn't dress. When he did dress, he played like a handful of snaps throughout the season. He was a guy who needed to again get stronger, get in an NFL training room, and get the NFL coaching, and you build on him. He's a guy next year who might take the next step like Levi Drake Rodriguez did and play 30% of the defensive snaps, be part of the rotation. But he's a guy I think is promising. I certainly expect he'll be back with the Vikings next year on the roster. How much he's going to play is going to be up to him. Taki Taimani was a guy that I liked in 2024, and he was a guy who, with a strong preseason himself, he made the team. But then his rookie season got derailed with a bit of an ankle injury. He didn't play a whole lot after the first few games. And this year he kind of got lost. He didn't hardly dressed until the end of the season. And he's a guy that is a pure run stuffing nose tackle type, doesn't give you much in the pass rush. And Brian Flores just didn't seem to have didn't want that type of one-dimensional guy on the field along the defensive line this year. So Taimani is a guy who I think it's possible he comes back and sticks with the practice squad again, but there's also a good chance I think that the Vikings move on from him and look to bring in somebody younger with a bit more pass rushing upside. So I'm not feeling like Taki's got a future with the Vikings after what I saw last year, but we'll see. Talking about the Vikings moving on from Javon Hargrave, Dave, if they do that, and I think that they will, they're going to need somebody at least one guy to come in and compete for the kind of stuff that playing time and the role that he had last year. Free agency wise, when you look at who's ready to go or scheduled to go on the market right now, not really an inspiring pool on the defensive line and the interior. You got a lot of veterans who are 30 plus,
Old.
Old, never really been difference makers at the NFL level. But one guy that did catch my eye is David Onyemata, and he played for the Falcons the past 3 years. He is about to turn 34, or he'll turn 34 in November. So he's actually older than Javon Hargrave. But last year, Pro Football Focus gave him a 78.2 grade. That was 8th best of the 134 interior defensive linemen they graded. So that's pretty impressive. And
especially for the age.
Yeah. And because of his age, Dave, I think that he would be a guy that you could sign on a pretty reasonable, not high-priced deal if you bring him in as a free agent. Another connection here is that Ryan Nielsen, who just got named as the new defensive line coach for us, and also the defensive run game coordinator. Nielsen knows Onyemata very well. He coached him when he was the defensive coordinator in New Orleans, and he coached him again when he was the defensive coordinator in Atlanta. And it's possible that Onyemata came to Atlanta because Nielsen was the defensive coordinator there. So Onyemata is a guy I think to watch out for because of his connection to Nielsen and the fact that he wouldn't be, despite what seems like I didn't really pay much attention to him when he was with Atlanta, but it seems like he had a pretty strong season there. And so again, he might be a guy just to watch out for as somebody on the Vikings radar to come in as that veteran to be part of the defensive line rotation in 2026.
Interesting.
Draft-wise.
There's 2 other veterans that make that list. DJ Reader finished 5th. He was 32, or is 32.
Yes.
John Franklin Meyer out of Denver. DJ Reader's out of Detroit. He had a good season. Sheldon Rankin, age 32, out of Houston. Another old-timer, and Daquan Jones, who's another old-timer at 34. But you're getting a key that the veterans that are available are generally 30 plus.
And and NFL teams aren't giving away or letting go really good young defensive tackles with the way how important interior pass rush and is these days at the defensive for NFL defenses, and also if those guys are good at stopping the run, that's another key thing too. Holding that running game at bay with your strong defensive line play. But you mentioned some other guys again that are good names, and Reader, the Vikings would know very well because they faced them twice this year with playing against the Lions in the division. So, but Onyemata is a guy that maybe Ryan Nielsen is going to say, we need to bring this guy in. I know what he can do, and he can do it well, and he can do it at a pretty good price. Just somebody to watch out for. Drafting wise, if the Vikings. A lot of stuff sometimes hinges on what the Vikings do in free agency. So if they bring in a DJ Reader or a David Onyemata, maybe I think the defensive line might go a little bit lower on their list of how they're of their needs during the draft. But last year, Dave, I thought that the Vikings were going to pick a defensive lineman pretty early in the draft. They didn't end up doing it. They ended up picking a defensive lineman in Ingram Dawkins, but that was the 5th round by then. It was a day 3 pick, not a day 1 or day 2 pick. This year, the Vikings have way more draft picks than they did last year. That gives them more picks at the bites at the apple? Does that mean that they've got I think more needs on the defensive side of the ball than the offensive side of the ball? So does that mean they're going to pick a defensive lineman on day 1 for the first time since they did with Sharif Floyd back in 2013? There have been guys that I've seen mocked. Interior defensive lineman I've seen mocked to the Vikings quite a few times. Peter Woods out of Clemson has, Caleb Banks out of Florida has, that Caden McDonald out of Ohio State. I've seen him mocked to the Vikings as well. And those are all guys that are really highly ranked in this draft of interior linemen. Last year, the Vikings, again, they didn't pick anybody early. They met with Derek Harmon from Oregon, who ended up going to the Steelers. So last year was supposed to be a pretty deep interior defensive line class. This year, I've heard different stories that some people saying it's weak, some people saying it's fine, but Banks would be a guy. The Vikings saw him at the Senior Bowl. He had a pretty good, strong Senior Bowl showing in practices in the games, and he's somebody who certainly would be available at 18 because he didn't play a whole lot last year in 2025. He had a really good 2024 season, but he only played 2 or 3 games this year with Florida. The thing about Woods and Banks in particular, Dave, from what I've been reading, is they're huge guys. They've got a potential to be game wreckers and difference makers at the NFL level, but they also seems like they have a large bust potential. And the Vikings drafts haven't been very good the past 4 years. This is a big season for the coaching staff, who's going to have a large role to play in the draft, and is with the way the Vikings are looking at this season, particularly the coaches, as being a must-win. Are they going to want to pick a risky prospect in the first round on day one, or are they going to go with more of a safer pick that they think is a better bet to work out long term? I don't know. We'll see. I feel like, but those are guys to watch out for early. Another guy I saw mocked to the Vikings in the second round, Matt Miller from ESPN mocked this guy, Lee Hunter from Texas Tech, who was also at the Senior Bowl. He had the Vikings picking him in the second round. Hunter's more of a nose tackle-y type guy. And again, I'm not so sure right now with the way Brian Flores runs his defense, whether that's what he wants out of if that's the kind of, his archetype for an interior defensive lineman. But Hunter is a guy to keep an eye on. And let's see if the Vikings have a private visit with him during the draft process, along with some of these other guys like Caleb Banks, Peter Woods, McDonald out of Ohio State. And those are just 4 names. There's others that I have not mentioned, and people are probably bringing them up in the chat or soon will. But
or go watch Tyler from last Thursday night. He had a show specifically on D linemen with special guests.
There you go. So, I think that the second round, third round, that could be where the Vikings, I don't know if they go there with the interior defensive line in the first round, but certainly second or third round, I could see them continuing to build that youth and, young, cheap talent with a lot of upside to add that to the defensive line room in Minnesota, especially when you know that Jonathan Allen, they're not going to get rid of him this year likely, but next year they certainly, I think, probably will, unless he plays a whole lot better than he did this season.
Yep. Hey, it's one of those deals, I love my big round bellies, and if you build up big round bellies on both sides of the ball, so where they're top guys, you're going to win a lot of football games. So
and you can talk about trying having dart throws in the 5th round, on the 6th round, the 7th round on these guys, which the Vikings have done almost every draft since 2022. But reality is, where are you going to get your stars, Dave? You're going to get them in the first 20 picks of the draft.
Yeah, and if not the first 100 picks in the draft, you got to have picks in those first 3 rounds, period. And this is the first year where we've had picks to do that.
Well, yeah, right now I think we're slated to have 4 in the top 100, and
where we haven't traded away our second rounder. Now it may happen, go to a quarterback somewhere, but we'll find out.
Mm-hmm. Indeed.
Now there was one comment by George I highlighted. It came earlier. Darren, any bets on the Canada-USA hockey game?
Yeah, Canada's going to win, of course. I expect they'll be in the gold medal game. The only thing is that right now, I think the U.S. is in the 3rd period of their game against Germany. So the number 1 seed in the whole tournament right now is Canada, based on goal differential, because both Canada and the U.S. are going to finish 3-0 in round robin. if U.S. finishes second, and it looks like they will play Sweden in the quarterfinal game. And Sweden hasn't looked very good, but you don't want to play Sweden in the quarterfinal game. in a winner.
There's a history there, yes.
And you win or go home scenario. So that'll be a tough quarterfinal for whoever ends up playing Sweden. And it looks like it's probably going to be the U.S. right now, which makes me feel better about Canada getting the gold medal in the men's hockey. But even if it ends up being U.S. Canada, I got to go with Canada, right? But it'll be a hell of a game. One either way.
All right. Well, I want to thank everybody that's joined us, and I forgot what having the show at this time, what it drives in the chat. And that is some great food questions or comments. You guys are making me hungry. But like I said, I want to thank everybody that's joined us today. You guys absolutely rock. Any last words there, Darren?
No, sir. We'll other than let the quarterback rumors continue to fly. If it might not have any basis in reality, but it sure is entertaining to read.
Yes, it is. All right, folks. What do we say, Darren?
We say SKOL Vikings, and thanks for watching.
SKOL Vikings!
Like, subscribe, and ring the bell, and rate us on your favorite podcast aggregator. Darren and Dave, thank you for watching this episode of Two Old Bloggers. We look forward to seeing you on every show on the new Vikings First and SKOL. You can find our podcasts as part of the Fans First Sports Network. Sports takes for the fan, from the fan. SKOL, everybody!